What's up, guys? It's G here, and welcome back to the Grizzly Life Podcast. In this episode, Colton talks about what he took away from the two books he recently read, one focused on breathing and the other on sleep. New episodes drop every Tuesday and Thursday, so make sure to subscribe, follow, and turn on notifications. Now let's get into episode 17 of the Grizzly Life Podcast.
Yo, what is up, guys? You've got Colton here today on our Thursday episode 17 of many. You've got just me, and we've got G in the producer chair. I've got two topics that kind of go hand in hand together that I'm going to talk about today. One being breathing, and two being sleep. I read two books recently that talked a lot about both. I thought it was a good idea to read about the things that we do every day to become better at those things or those items. I don't know, whatever word I'm looking for here, but breathing, sleeping, exercise. I'm trying to learn a little bit more about like the things that we do daily and how we can be better at them and that kind of stuff. Before we jump into that, my name's Colton Burt. I'm 26 years old, soon to be 27, so I'll have to change this up a little bit. But we own Grizzly Fitness, which is 6 fitness facilities, 5 of which are Grizzly Fitness, 1 of which is Grizzly O-Town. That location is partnered with Jacob Colburn of Oshkosh. We also own 4 properties, 3 of which are occupied by our gyms, and the 4th one is kind of vacant actually in the parking lot of our gym. So we've got some ideas what we're going to do with that. I don't want to release anything there yet because I'm sure some people listen to this and they might hold me to it, and we're just not sure what we're going to do with that property yet. We also own a company called Priority Fitness. Priority Fitness is a fitness equipment install, repair, service, maintenance style company. So we travel the Midwest, primarily Wisconsin, but we will travel out of the state lines if needed to do gym installs, gym extractions. We'll purchase gym stuff, basically anything gym equipment related, residentially, commercially, we can do. So that's kind of what we got going on over here. And now we've got the Grizzly Life Podcast. The point of this podcast is, 1, to practice and become better at speaking and releasing content and that kind of stuff. Content is one of the things we have been working on as of recently. I have yet to post on Instagram or Facebook as of this episode. Since I've begun working on my marketing stuff, I've been using Snapchat a lot more, just kind of throwing behind the scenes type stuff up there. Exercising, daily routine, food habits, that kind of stuff. That being said, I need to post on my Instagram and Facebook, so I'm saying that out loud now, so maybe somebody can hold me accountable for that. Anyways, thank you all for joining us today on episode 17. We can get right into kind of the topics we've got going on. So let me pull up this title of the book real quick so I can reference it, because I do want to do a better job of telling you guys what books I'm reading, and if you guys want to read them yourself, go for it. The name of this book is Breath, The New Science of a Lost Art by James Nestor. Basically, this guy has spent a lot of time learning ancient breathing techniques and how to breathe better, and kind of reviewed evolution and how our mouths and our throats and just everything's kind of changed with time due to what's going on in our life and that kind of stuff. So he did all this studying, traveled all across the world, did some of these experiments himself. So the book talks a lot about like some experiments that he tried, experiments that he's researched and read on. He references a lot of other experiments that scientists have done and that kind of stuff on, animal testing and that kind of stuff. Not saying that he even mentions in the book that this is a tougher experiment to read like in depth if you were the one actually reading the entire experiment. But anyways, he did all this research and kind of put this book together to help us all breathe better. And so the main thing was mouth breathing and how bad mouth breathing really is for us. And I've heard people say it before, and from a posture standpoint, you get used to mouth breathing. Your mouth is always kind of open, your jaw's drooping, that kind of stuff. But and I read the book, but there's a difference in when you take in oxygen through your nose versus through your mouth and that kind of stuff. Also, one of the main issues is that we overbreathe. A lot of us are taking in too much oxygen and not getting enough of the, in quotations, stale air out. So the air that we've already got in us, that's turning into carbon dioxide. We've got these big mouth breaths coming in and these short ones going out. So we're actually taking more air in than getting out. And so that's not good for us. So mouth breathing, if you think about it more often, like when I've been working out the past week, I've been doing my best to like try to just nose breathe, which is difficult. You always feel stuffy in the gym, maybe when you're sleeping and that kind of stuff. So number one thing to do is focus on nose breathing, being more efficient that way. Some people might think too, well, my nose is just always stuffed. I just can't breathe that way. And he kind of talks about it. And he just mentions just practice breathing through your nose more often. If you don't use it, you will lose it type thing. So if you just decide, well, my nose doesn't work right, I'm going to use my mouth. And some people do have issues. I'm aware of that. But if you're used to mouth breathing, your nose isn't going to want to work the way it's supposed to. So if you can just kind of push yourself to practice doing that, that will benefit us in the long run. Another thing he talks about is the right amount of breath, the slow breathing technique he talks about. And this traces back like thousands of years or whatever he kind of mentions is slow breathing. And what that is the perfect breath is what he also refers it to. It's a 5.5 second inhale and a 5.5 second exhale. And he kind of compares it to a wave. So when you take a deep breath in and you take a deep breath out, like you kind of just let it flow all together. So you're not taking an inhale, holding it, and exhaling it and holding it. It's just kind of like a smooth wave in and out, 5.5 seconds in, 5.5 seconds out. So it's a good breathing technique. When you're trying to sleep, just do 5.5 in, 5.5 out, kind of count the time in your head. It should help you kind of calm down. It also gets that breath rate a little bit lower. You know, we're talking about kind of our respiratory rate per minute, our over breathing aspect. He kind of mentions how the average breather now takes like 16 breaths a minute or something like that. And really, I don't remember what he referenced. Maybe it was like, it's better around like 11 or something like that. Obviously, doing 5.5 in, 5.5 out is a very slow breathing technique. So that's just going to get us to calm down, kind of bring our blood pressure down, bring our stress down and that kind of stuff. So use that technique as you'd like. He also talks a lot about, and you'll have to read the book for yourself, but at the end of the book, he has all these different breathing techniques that he learned over the years. Again, some of them are quick little tips and tricks for you to, again, bring your stress down, maybe go into a meeting, go into an interview, that kind of stuff. There's just some cool little tips and tricks in there on breathing as a whole. So what I took away from it and what I'm trying to do now is be more conscious of nose breathing when I work out, day-to-day life, taking a deep breath for a second, just stopping. And so focusing on the nose breathing, but also when I sleep at night, I've been much more conscious as well. When I wake up randomly, you know, you're tossing and turning. Usually if you're mouth breathing, you can kind of feel your mouth being a little bit dry and that kind of stuff. I haven't had that issue this week since I've read this book. I feel like I wake up and I like close my mouth right away and I get back to sleep. But I'm doing a good job of just like using my nose and I don't know, it's just kind of interesting. Once you start reading about it, it kind of opens your eyes and you're like, oh, I didn't even really realize I'm sitting at my desk with my mouth open, like mouth breathing, right? So anyways, enough on breathing. This other book that I read, let me pull up the title here for you. Yes, Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. So this guy's like extremely smart when it comes to the brain and he studies all this stuff and he's like a neuroscientist, I believe. Dreaming and sleeping and the brain, he studies a lot on this. And I believe he's a professor at like Berkeley, UC Berkeley or something like that over in California. The book is, I would say it's easy-ish to read. It just like, he'll have several pages in there where it's like going on about these experiments, or he kind of doesn't go off track, but for the average human like myself, I don't need to read 4 pages of this. I just want to kind of get the facts out that I want. So when I try to read some of these books, I'm trying to get like the golden nugget or just understanding what I want to know. So one of the first things that I took away from this, and I believe I mentioned it a couple episodes ago, was the effect that caffeine has on the brain, which I'm actually on week 3. Actually, by the time you hear this episode, it will have been about 4 weeks of no caffeine. as of right now when I'm recording it, it's been about 3 full weeks. I feel great. The first 2 weeks were rough. I always wanted like an afternoon nap or like a late morning nap. Just kind of had that grogginess, kind of had like a little bit of edginess, just kind of, it was goofy. But I made it through. It wasn't anything crazy. My sleep has actually been very good the last 2 weeks, and I was curious on how that would have an effect without caffeine in my body. So overall, no caffeine. It's been going great. I think I was more addicted to like flavors and the aspect of, in quotations, I'm drinking caffeine or coffee. But anyways, I decided to cut that out. One of the first things I learned from this book, and I just would like to say, I did not cut out caffeine because of this book. It just kind of happened. One weekend I forgot I didn't drink any caffeine, and I said, you know what, I'm just going to try to keep running with it. And so that's how I ended up quitting caffeine as of right now. Anyways, back to my point. The beginning of this book talks about caffeine and the issues it has on the brain. And so there's 2 reasons that our body knows when to sleep. 1 being your circadian rhythm, 2 being sleep pressure, which is called adenosine. When you wake up in the morning, your adenosine is at the lowest point, and gradually throughout the day, this adenosine builds up and connects with these receptors. So your adenosine is being released, and then it connects with these receptors. And then by the end of the day, you have this what's called sleep pressure. You've obviously got your circadian rhythm, which is your body clock. It knows it's time to go to sleep. But the sleep pressure is at its highest point right before you go to bed. So it's making you come down, and maybe it begins helping you release melatonin, that kind of stuff. It's wanting you to fall asleep, right? So what caffeine does is it blocks those receptors that the adenosine would normally attach to. And so you drink your caffeine, it doesn't feel like sleep pressure is building up good. All of a sudden the caffeine wears off 4 hours later, whatever it is in your body, because it's different for everybody, and you get the caffeine crash. That's because that adenosine was still building up that entire time. The caffeine's worn off those receptors. The adenosine attaches to the receptors, and it all hits you like a brick wall, basically. So that's kind of how caffeine works. So do what you want with that information. My recommendation is that if you're going to drink caffeine, drink it early on. It does have a half-life of, I think, was it like 8 hours or something like that? So if I drink a cup of coffee at noon, and let's say it's 200 milligrams, let's say I drink 200 milligrams of caffeine at noon, my body could still very well have 100 milligrams of caffeine it's trying to process by 8 p.m. So that being said, if you wake up, you want to give yourself 60 minutes to wake up because your cortisol levels. After 60 minutes, have your coffee. And that's just kind of what I would, if I was drinking it still, that's the best way to go about it. That way, caffeine doesn't have an effect on your sleep at night. You can kind of get around it that way and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of one of the first things I learned about the book. Circadian rhythm, adenosine / sleep pressure, how caffeine can affect it and that kind of stuff. Basically, this book the entire time talks about how good REM sleep is for us and how magical it is. It does go in to talk about dreaming and what dreams might be good for. It's hard for them to study dreams and what you're actually dreaming about, but it does go into depth a little bit on dreams itself. They also there's a ton of studies in this book. So, for example, one of them was somebody, I think it was if you stay up until, let's say you wake up at 6 a.m. or 7 a.m., whatever it was, if you stay up until 2 a.m. and then you drive home for whatever reason, completely sober, you're actually just as impaired as you would have been if you had drank and got to the legal limit of 0.08. So they compare that lack of sleep to being impaired, being under the limit or being above the influence, under the influence, whatever, of a 0.08. So kind of interesting there. Another interesting thing was the power that dreams can give us. And so there is a part in the book that talks about this pianist that came up to him after one of his, I don't know if it was like this guy's TED Talk or what it was, or after one of his speeches, but this pianist comes up and goes, for some reason, every night I'm trying to learn this new song, and I just can't get it. He says, but I wake up the next morning and I can play it perfectly. He says, I don't understand. And so, again, you'll have to read the book to kind of get the word for word, but there's like this thing that happens in our sleep, like the synapses and the way the brain connects, that it puts it all together for us as we're sleeping. So it's building for us while we're asleep, right? We're dreaming of this. The brain's making the connections it needs to, and it actually allows us to perform better as soon as we wake up and that kind of stuff, which is kind of really cool. It also can help with like traumatic issues in your life or emotional things like of that. So let's say you go through a breakup, and I don't know exactly how it goes, but it was talking about the person who dreams about it can typically deal with it better. Now, this doesn't necessarily go with those with like PTSD and that kind of stuff, but when you dream about it, your dreams are trying to help you get over it and overcome it and that kind of stuff. So in the beginning, it's tougher. You're dreaming about it and that kind of stuff, but your brain's actually working at night to like get rid of the memories or move on or whatever aspect, right? So it's kind of interesting. Again, that REM sleep factor can do a lot for us. Also, a fun fact from the book, the guy who created the periodic table actually dreamt it in REM sleep. So prior to having a periodic table, which we've all reviewed in school, he had this dream. It was built out perfectly. He woke up, wrote it down, and then made like a couple minor tweaks to it. But again, it's just kind of the power of dreams. It's pretty crazy. So one of the other things that was very interesting from the book, they had a ton of like studies between, if I slept for 4 hours versus 6 hours versus 8 hours, and just how crazy of a difference it is on that lack of sleep, and how much like our human culture now, or our the American race especially, the way that our work shifts and our wake times and that kind of stuff throw us off completely from what we should be getting. And there's like 70% of Americans or something crazy do not get enough sleep on a day-to-day basis. And then on the weekends, they try to catch up for it, which just doesn't work out. You can't catch up on sleep that you've missed. It just doesn't work that way. Once you've lost REM sleep, you cannot get it back. Even though you can feel like, lack of sleep Monday through Friday, and then Saturday I'm going to sleep in because I can. It's not the best for you, right? A normal routine sleep schedule is kind of what they recommend. So, but they talk about artificial light, caffeine, alcohol, inconsistent sleep schedules. All of these things together can really make for poor sleep. Now, we all have our vices. I'm not going to not drink beer or alcohol because we all have to live a little bit too. So I'm not telling everybody they have to quit caffeine. I'm not telling everybody they should go sober. I'm not saying any of that kind of stuff. But there are little things that we can do to kind of help improve our sleep. Is kind of, I guess, there's a lot of things I can continue talking about the book, but some little things that I've taken away from the book that can help us all sleep better. Artificial light is one of those things that keep us up. So if let's say we're in bed at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, whatever time it is, but you had your lights on in your room prior to that, your melatonin release isn't going to be what it should be because of the artificial light. When us humans were, before Thomas Edison and the light bulb and modern lights and that kind of stuff, our body knew it was nighttime, it was time to go to bed. We did have candlelight and that kind of stuff, but that didn't have the same effect on us as like the light bulbs that we've created due to the lux that they give off and this kind of stuff. So artificial light, the less of that before bed, the better. We talk about like blue light glasses or, the yellow tinted glasses or the red glasses. Those are all like kind of a good thing to maybe get in the habit of if you want to try to bring your melatonin release to be earlier. Again, this could be one of many factors that keep you up late at night. Later than, again, if you try to go to bed at 9, but you can't fall asleep till 10, and that's just how you are, artificial light might be one of the things that could be affecting that. So they do make light bulbs that are like, I don't know, if you look up melatonin light bulbs, they'll be red and they'll give off a lower lux rating and they'll be better for sleep and that kind of stuff. But whatever you can do to help get rid of some of the artificial light at night when you're getting ready to come down, blue light glasses, that kind of stuff, all of that stuff helps. I know most of our phones now have like a setting where blue light will be canceled out after 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. I recommend turning that on as well. Caffeine, again, if you can drink it early in the morning, that's kind of best, at least 1 hour after waking up, but don't be drinking it in the evening before you go to sleep. Now, there are some people out there that could probably drink a cup of coffee at 8 p.m. and be in bed by 9. I was just actually talking to a buddy from kind of like the St. Louis area literally yesterday, and he was telling me how he drinks his last Monster at 8 p.m. at night, and he's out in bed. He's in bed by 9:30 or something like that. He drinks it at 9 p.m. and he's sleeping like a baby by 10. So, I mean, again, these are just little tips and tricks. They might not be for everybody. Alcohol, they say don't use alcohol as a nightcap. Try to, again, if you're going to drink alcohol, again, I'm not going to tell anybody what they should be doing with their life. If you're going to drink alcohol, what I try to do, sometimes I try to drink more in the afternoons, drink a bunch of water before I go to bed, give myself the best opportunity to get through that. But, I know we all have our vices. I know we've got the Friday night, whatever we got to do. So do what you want with that. Inconsistent sleep schedules. The more consistent we can be with our sleep schedules, the better. Monday through Friday, I'm very locked in, but if you can carry that through the weekend, even better. That's just one of those things that'll help your brain know what's going on. Another little one that I like too is our body needs to cool down 2 degrees before we go to bed. Or like as we go to sleep, our body needs to cool down 2 degrees, and that allows us to like get in a nice deep sleep. That being said, what he recommends and what I've actually been doing prior to this book is if you can take a hot shower or a hot bath before you go to bed, say like a half hour before, what that'll do will allow the heat to come to kind of like skin level. And even though you're making yourself hotter in the shower, it'll allow you to actually like cool down quicker once you get out of the shower and that kind of stuff. So a hot shower before bed, you'll come out and actually cool down better. Because if you're going to take a cold shower before bed, your body's going to do everything it can to try to like heat itself back up. So hot shower makes your body want to cool back down. So a little tip there. You can use that as you want as well. I think I've been doing it. I try to do it consistently, but sometimes I take a shower. I don't know the science, if you take a shower at 6 p.m. or 5 p.m. versus 8 p.m., a half hour before bed or whatever, I assume closer to bedtime, the better. So those are kind of a couple little things. Let me see if I had another note for you guys here. Your room temp is another one. A lot of people, he says like 65 is kind of like the sweet spot for a room. He says below 55, that's really bad for you. I don't know who the heck is sleeping with their room below 55 degrees. But he also says a lot of people have their house set between 70 and 72, which is also too warm for us to sleep in as well. So if you can, get your room temperature around that 65. That's also what I sleep at, so that's good. Overall, I'd say the book is definitely a good read. Even if you just kind of skim it and find the stuff that's valuable to you, I'm sure there's a lot of things that you can kind of learn from it. Again, there's a lot of experiments that he references, a lot of like in-depth REM sleep versus non-REM sleep versus light sleep and all this kind of stuff. So overall, it's a really good read. I learned a good amount from it. Basically, the concept was like everything that you do on a day-to-day basis, REM sleep helps every aspect of that. So there's some studies where they've got people sleeping in the MRI machine or whatever it is. They've got them hooked up to all these things. And as soon as they get in REM sleep, they wake them back up. So they're trying to get people out of this REM sleep. And they'll neglect people of sleep. They'll screw up their REM sleep. They'll do all these things. And they do all of these tests and studies on them to see like how responsive they are. So I don't know. There's a lot we can kind of ramble on and go on back and forth, but it's a good read. Sleep is basically the foundation of everything. He says with good sleep, good quality sleep, you can get rid of your risk of your immune system works better through good quality sleep. Your day-to-day activities, your function, your driving, your everything basically is better with sleep. Your knowledge retention levels, like if you're getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night versus that guy who's getting 5 hours of sleep at night, you'll retain more of what you learned that day prior and that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. I definitely recommend reading it if you're into that kind of stuff. At the very least, skim through it. I think the breathing book and the sleep book are both very good books to read just because it's something that we all do every day, and why not be the best at it? So that's kind of what I've got for you today. It's just kind of a ramble on the 2 most recent books that I've read. Hopefully you guys give them a read. If you want to follow me on Snapchat, Colton.Burt, Colton.Burt. Instagram and Facebook, ColtonBurt19. Email is marketing@fitnessgrizzly.com. Again, episode 17 of many. We appreciate you guys tuning in with us. We'll see you next week.